The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls podcast. We have another fantastic guest for you today, but before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and also Light Fair. Light Fair is the beginning of May this year. It's just a few short weeks away. We will see you guys there.
And this is also financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes, a whole lot more, and information about the new NAILD Lighting Specialist in Controls certification. Hopefully you're checking it out if you want to learn more about lighting controls, especially in the distribution channels. But, it's just going to be a really great opportunity. Our first session is going to happen in June this year at Lightovation. So, but hopefully we're going to have more than just that in the future. So if you miss this chance, it's going to come back in the future. But anyways, also huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which we could not do these shows without, Max Light, and especially their C-Max lighting controls platform. We had a really awesome interview with Umesh when they first started sponsoring this show, and he talked about this really fantastic product, which it really kind of embodies that plug and play mentality. You know, there's a lot of groups out there that will say plug and play, and there's still some finessing that you need to do. This really is like, what's awesome about this is that it has a USB-C connector that is universal. And so as a result, your devices, any Max Light fixture that has this, you can swap out your lighting controls devices. You can go from their basic platform all the way through their enterprise platform and mix and match throughout the project. You don't need to have controls at the outset of the project. You can go and install it later on and get it programmed and meeting the requirements of the project is a really awesome solution for these projects that have, tight timelines or tight budget restrictions or whatever. It's really worth checking out all of the levels that they have available. So check them out. Maxlight, maxlite.com/CMAX. But anyways, so let's get into the conversation here. We have Adam. Adam, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Sure, no problem. My name is Adam Levine. I am a lighting designer. I'm with First Circle Design in Costa Mesa, California. I really got my start in lighting in theater, from good old high school theater to college, grad school. So I'm an MFA in lighting design. Done lots of shows, plays, musicals, dance recitals. Done some TV, some film, and then I needed to pay the bills and have a family, so I switched over to architecture. And then wanted to bring turns out that architecture really started with some theatrical lighting folks. So a lot of the design elements do come over, and a lot of the controls, what this podcast is about, really kind of does move both ways between, a theatrical, really want to get down to the nitpicky, really everything's individually controlled, and you really get to get the minute details and quarters of a percent up and down to really get the scene looking right. In some cases, I've had to do that on an architecture job because, the way the drivers, that's another conversation to get into, the drivers don't necessarily work in our favor. So 30%, 50%, 70. Okay, it goes from 90 to 10. Okay, that's a bad driver, but you got to make it work. So you're learning, you learn what you design, and and going to the LED world, which has been great, and getting to learn about drivers and the different control manufacturers, control protocols, typologies. And you know what? I'm going to say something that's really biased and offend people, but DMX really is the best.
We have so many people on this show that are either pro or con, and it's amazing to, just I feel like anybody who has been through theater is going to be on the side of DMX, regardless of whether they think it's the ideal for everything. It really is an excellent resource when it's leveraged correctly. When it's not leveraged correctly, or it's poorly specified or poorly implemented, then you can have some really big heartburn as a result of that.
A lot of the heartburn is with the manufacturers who don't know it
Mm,
well enough
Mm.
because I had a conversation recently
sure.
that I said, "What is I need the DMX chart. Can you give me the DMX chart so I know how to patch this into the system?" And they go,
Mhm.
"You need you program the chip that way." I go, "No, no, you program the LEDs." I go, "No, my controller talks to your chip that has been predefined with, is it an RGBW or is it WRGB?
Mhm.
What are the values from
So
0 to
so
255?" Yeah, crazy.
I'm gonna stop you because we just you just said a mouthful that probably only 10% of our audience knows what you just said. So I
Come
want
on,
to kind of break
11%,
that
please.
apart. All right, fair enough. But all right, let's start with what a DMX chart is. So when you go to a manufacturer and you say, "What's your DMX chart?" What are you asking for in that case?
I'm asking for the different channels of control and the values.
Mhm.
And DMX in an 8-bit, it's 0 to 255. There's 255 steps of control. In a
Right.
16-bit, it's 16,535 um, steps. In
Yeah.
an
So
8-bit
so
is typically what we're using.
basically, between 0 and 100%, you actually have 255
55
steps,
steps.
256 steps, um, that you can actually progress through. A lot of
Mm.
software does kind of skip past most of those individual increments, and so 1%, 2%, 3%, you're actually jumping large gaps of numbers
You are.
in that chain. And so in theater, that level of precision is actually not even good enough. That's why you do 16-bit, which gives you even higher resolution to be able to have greater control over just the tiniest adjustments to your
Mhm.
intensities, or whatever the attribute you're trying to control is. And so this chart is basically saying, this is the address. These are the ranges of what's going to get affected in these
Yep.
addresses and what the attributes are.
And not every control system has a profile built into the system
Right.
to
Mhm.
let you control that fixture. So you have to build a profile and you need that chart to tell you how to make that custom
Well,
profile.
and so let's talk about that. So what is a profile?
A profile is a God, it's a set of commands, I
If
guess,
I'm
that
putting you,
I
if
mean.
I'm putting your feet to the fire here to define these
No, it's
things that
fine.
are just
I mean, a
you
profile,
know.
control systems have built-in libraries of
Yep.
fixture types and fixtures that
Mhm,
they can control. And so a profile is part of that library. You have you're talking about a random RGBW and RGB, just a
mhm,
tunable white. They've got certain pre-built canned um, profiles for different types of fixtures. And it depends on what the manufacturer has programmed that DMX chip in their fixture to
Mhm.
receive.
mhm,
That's what I'm then, so what I'm looking for is a profile. And when I've talked to them, they're not really sure what I'm talking about. And I send them to just
mhm,
a web search. Here, look at a DMX chart. I'm looking for this. And typically with an LED, I guess, tape light or just a fixture, it's red, 0 to 255. It's 0 to 255.
mhm.
It's just red.
Yep.
0 to 100% green. It's RGBW. It goes in that order, and
Right.
it's done that way. And that's a simple that.
Well, and
And sometimes
some
that's enough.
manufacturers do, you know, WRGB or some other
Yep.
direction, and that's why the
Right.
profiles are really critical, because if you have a color wheel, for instance, and your grids are incorrect because you have the orientation incorrect, that profile
Yep.
corrects that orientation so that the color wheel is still accurate. But if you don't have that profile and you assume that it's an RGBW fixture, you set it up a custom profile, your color wheel is going to be so weird, and you're going to pick a color on the color wheel and it's going to be not that color. It's going to be something
And
very
most of the
different.
time, it's because it's in HSI, and I'll break that down. It's
Right.
hue, saturation, intensity. There are some manufacturers out
Hmm.
there, won't say who they are, that they only put their fixtures in HSI mode. So when you on a
Yep.
color picker
Hmm.
and you're trying to find your red goes to blue because you need to have three sliders for the hue, the saturation of that, and then the intensity. And it's like you can't do RGBW. You can have 4 channels. It's a 3 channel
Right.
HSI, and it's not on a cut sheet. And I feel like manufacturers don't understand that cut sheets are the ink on a cut sheets. You don't pay per letter on a cut sheet. Like put the information on there. It's
It
We're not charging
is
per
true though.
letter.
You don't typically find that information in cut sheets, right? It's typically in the user manuals, right? What are the different modes of that specific driver or fixture, right? What are the different modes? How do you change it from 8-bit to 16-bit, or change the profile, change the dimming curves, right? In the theatrical world, all of that per manufacturer, per product is able to be changed. And that's very rarely on cut sheets. It's found in the user manuals. But just going back to libraries for a second, for anyone who's not familiar, I think it's important to note too that that library in the console or in the architectural controller is often written by the manufacturer of the device. They take the information from the manufacturer of the lighting fixture, but the physical profile in the library is made by the manufacturer of the control device. So it is very common that you could have controller from one company that works one way and another that is slightly different. And sometimes if they don't, if depending on how often that fixture is used and the feedback from the end users back to the manufacturers, it can get updated and can get fixed. But sometimes you have to go in and make subtle tweaks yourself.
There is one company, and they're based in Europe, that has pre-built canned profiles for all entertainment and a lot of architectural, if I may say the name. It's Carillon.
Yeah, go.
They
Yep.
are the ones that typically, if you open a lighting, an entertainment console, all the profiles built in come from Carillon. So manufacturers go to them and say, hey, include our fixtures. So everyone who's, I guess, membership of them,
Yep.
all their control systems will have pre-built. So
Right.
I've been able to pull up certain architectural manufacturers. They're in there because they
Yep.
subscribe to the Carillon in the different control
Yeah, and
systems that are out there in the market.
well, and I think the other thing here to note is that Ron, you kind of went quickly past this, but I think our audience would benefit from knowing this is, each just because the system does DMX doesn't necessarily mean that they have the profiles or that their profiles function the same way, because
Correct.
especially when you're dealing with consoles for theatrical spaces, which a lot of programmers for these high-end architainment spaces will use, they usually deviate towards the brand that they're most familiar with, because each console has its own syntax and its own way of being programmed, and the profiles also behave slightly differently.
Slightly.
And again, they might have profiles for like MA versus ETC, and so it's a challenge to make sure that you're really narrowing down onto what platform you're dealing with as well.
And those looking to use DMX for their products they're using, and they think that might be the best control platform to control with, they also need to pay attention to do their fixtures self-terminate, or do they need a physical terminator? A terminator goes at the end of the DMX line. It's I don't know the exact ohm resistor, but it goes across pins 2 and 3. It's a device that basically, as the signal, because the DMX signal goes from the controller and it goes through every single device on that line. And in order to not get any feedback coming backwards, you put this, it's called a term as a terminator at the end of your line, so that the signal can get just
it's 120
captured
ohm resistor.
120 ohm, there it is.
And it just absorbs that energy.
Absorbs that energy, so you don't have any feedback and weird stuff. And a lot of manufacturers don't put that on their cut sheets, or if they do, some contractors don't know what it is and they don't install it, and you're like, why don't I have control? Sometimes
I think
the control is off.
I think that's partly why ESTA came out with the DMX compliance standard, which came out last year. And hopefully we're going to see manufacturers start complying with that to make sure that, okay, are you DMX compliant? Yes. And DMX 512, I should be saying. I know we have a number of audience members who are
DMX 512A.
Well, no, I mean, basically the point here is that they want us to say DMX 512 because they don't want to conflate DMX. And so it's not that it's the standard DMX 512A, which is what the DMX standard is. But it's just more of a way of defining that, okay, it's 512 addresses DMX version, because there are other versions of DMX out there that are not 512 addresses. And so, yeah. but anyway,
if I can go to the other thing, it's Dolly. Dolly would be the next thing in line. If you're going to go, DMX is the top, I think Dolly would be the next thing in line, because that really gives any user the flexibility in their space.
Hmm.
Because today this room is an office and this room
Hmm.
is, a break room, but the next day it's all offices, or it's a accounting, or it's a CEO, and you got to be able to rezone something, and you can't rezone in a 0 to 10. So you're able to move things around, and
Well,
if
you
they move
can, but
walls,
you have to gut the whole system.
you have to gut the system where giving every fixture its own address, you can then
Hmm.
readdress.
Right. And I think that's a good point, because a lot of people do appreciate the digital platform because of that ability. Each luminaire has a unique identity and can be reprogrammed as needed, as opposed to having to rerun the wire and add additional
Yes.
devices. And so, from your perspective, I mean, we didn't really talk too much about this, but you're a specifier, you're a designer, you do this day in,
Yeah.
day out, talking to end users and owners and architects. And so, from your stance, what are the resistance points to DMX and Dolly being more widespread adopted in the States?
Cost. And it's not the
Mm,
cost of the system, it's the cost coming from the general contractor and the electrical contractor who are
mhm.
not familiar enough with it, so they throw on the dollar signs, and they'll figure it out later. And so it gets
Yeah,
cut right away. So when they're going through the budgeting, you go,
right.
"This is what you need. This is what you've said how you wanna run your building. So therefore, this is the control system you need." Well, it's coming back too expensive. I go, "Well, it really isn't." It may be
Yeah.
looking at 5-10% more depending on the system from what you're gonna get. It's your contractor doesn't know what they're doing.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah,
where
and
things
so
fall short.
yeah, and that agrees with some of the observations we've been hearing about. Is
Yeah.
it's really not about. In fact, some systems can be cheaper
Yeah.
just by product
Yeah.
alone and wire alone, by being digital. But it is sort of the labor, the people who are making the estimate, the quote for this, that are really kind of making this more challenging to take on.
I had
And
one
so,
project not too long ago that had the same thing. They had a standard 0 to 10. I go, "We can give you Dolly and save you
mhm.
$100,000." And they said, "No." Because they needs to be the same as their other stores. I'm like, "But the control wall station looks identical. You still hit day, night, breakfast, lunch. It doesn't matter what's on the back end." They said, "No." And then during inspections, the fire marshal said, "Oh, you don't have enough emergency light." I go, "Had it been the dolly, I can
Mhm.
readdress, make these emergency, click, it's on a computer screen. You click, 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 that's now emergency." They spent hours and days, 24 hours a day, rerunning conduit and wire and adding lights
Oh,
to appease an inspector, and I'm like, "You would have saved 100K plus whatever you're spending now to get this
Yeah.
if you just did it originally, and you would have been able to." And so the clients just don't get it.
yeah. That's such a tough thing, and so, but was the resistance to that just came from the owner on that one? That wasn't
Owner.
specifically related. Okay, yeah. I mean
It was
that,
an
and
owner.
that's
It
and
wasn't gonna
that's tough.
cost,
And I'm
and they appreciate it, but it
yeah.
wasn't the same as what they've always done.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I can from a maintenance standpoint, I guess you could potentially argue that, right? We use the same fixtures, we use the same drivers, we do the same thing. Our maintenance guys from building X and Y know how to do this. And so I do understand that to a degree. However, as everything moves forward into the digital age and our fixtures are digital, we should be using a digital control platform. And just
Mhm.
because it worked that way is not the best answer. And obviously, it sounds like you advocated to not do that very, very much. But just because it worked that way once and was the right thing then doesn't mean it's the right thing now or moving forward into the future. So, how do we, is there an easy way? There's no easy way. Is there a way to kind of help propel things with these contractors and electricians? How can we help sort of, help them to get these costs down and get them to understand these systems?
The lunch and learn, which is amazing. I didn't even I go, "What is a lunch and learn?" I had no idea what that was, and when I joined the business 10 years ago, and I'm like, "Oh, this is." I go, "Why are you doing it to me? I know what the fixture is. Do it to the contractor. You need to have these with the contractors. Do your factory tours with the contractors. Get some of the top electrical contractors and commissioning agents in there and learn the system really well." And they go, "Oh, this is really easier than we think it is. Yes,
Mhm.
just you don't have to placate to me. I know what the system can do. You don't need to trust me. I know what you do. Talk to them because I can put it on there, but they're going to substitute it out. So get into the contractors. Make sure that they really want to use your stuff, and that'll help.
Well, and I think that this again kind of hits on another topic that we talk about a lot, which is education and getting the awareness out there because
Yep.
I think we do a really good job of self-educating internally to designers and specifiers, but we don't do as good a job of kind of sharing that knowledge outward to the adjacent
Yes.
groups. And
Yep.
so,
We have CEUs to complete, but contractors don't. And I'm only talking about the contractors in the office, the inside sales guys. Those are the guys that need to
oh, sure, sure,
do this
sure.
because they're the ones who are doing the bidding and the
Hmm.
the takeoffs. The guys in the field are the best in the world. So you can have a bad experience with the guys in
Well,
the office, but the guys in the field know
I
what they're
think
doing
that's a really
more than
good
anything.
distinction to draw here because of the fact that you're right. I mean, we do kind of lump a whole industry of different roles under the name of contractor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas
True.
you're right. We really are, when we're talking about estimations and quotations, we're talking about somebody who's not out in the field, somebody
Right.
who is more just looking at drawings and coming up with numbers. And as a result, we do have this sort of barrier to
Yep.
that knowledge because the people in the field do know their stuff. They do it all the time.
Right.
But it's more of the reviewers of the drawings that are the ones that are. So,
They need the
is
education.
there a way? Yeah, is there a way that we can connect with those people? Is there a way we can get them educated about these things?
There's gotta be a way. I mean, if it's getting to the ownership of the companies and letting the ownerships of who own these, you know, uh,
Yep.
contracting and saying, "This is what you need," you know, there's some courses and give them some incentive to get trained. Because I don't get pa as a specifier, I don't get paid on what I specify. I get paid a
Right.
flat fee for designing it up front. The contractor is
Mhm.
the one who makes money on whatever I specify. So, it would benefit them to get educated on what it is that I'm specifying
Mhm.
or other specifiers are
Yeah.
specifying.
And not to self advocate, but this seems like a perfect opportunity, so I'm going to take it. But this is exactly what we're focusing on with the Nailed LSC, right? What
Mhm.
Webster had mentioned at the beginning of the show. Now, Nailed is obviously very focused on distributors, but the class itself is open to anybody, and we had a whole podcast on it. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. That's not what this episode is about. But it's just a perfect opportunity to kind of interject there, and that's right. That is really
Yeah.
what the Nailed LSC is focused on. Is it's breaking that whole project up into three phases: the pre-bid design, the distributors, and looking at the drawings and doing the takeoffs and doing the bidding, and then the installers themselves. So we have those three tracks really set for it, and to really it's to get the basics right. The
Mhm.
LSC as it sits right now is very much get the basics, get people to understand, to take that opportunity to better themselves, better their company, and then better their bids, and
Right.
better themselves in the field. It's everything.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think, on that point, we the idea hopefully we'll be able to expand this to DMX and Dolly because those are much
Yes.
more elevated platforms of lighting controls. But getting that familiarity out there is really critical to your point, Adam, because, getting these plan reviewers to understand what it is they're looking at and how to bid it correctly is a challenge.
Yes.
Um, and I think the other thing that's really interesting that you brought up about your example of the owner saying, "Well, that's not what we always use."
Right.
I wonder if there's some inertia there too that's kind of keeping us from taking the next step to digital as well, because it's like, well, we've always done 0 to 10.
That client was a national retailer. It's not like it's not on the same campus. It's a new
Hmm.
store for them. I'm like, I
Right.
understand that's not what you're used to, but the back end doesn't. You're not using the same drywall brand
Right.
in every store you're using around the country. It's whatever drywall's local to your. You don't care about the drywall
Well, and
being
I,
used. Why should you care about the brains being used?
I wonder if there's some hesitation there to try new products to them, not new to the industry, but new to them because of some bad experience in the past.
That's what I was thinking.
It's all they hired us, so they obviously trust our expertise in the field. And
Great
while
point.
they own everything and they're paying for everything, that's one. But
Mhm.
you hired me for a reason, so you trust that I know what I'm talking about and I'm working on your best interest.
No,
But
and
they did say on the
I
next
think
project,
that
no problem. It was too late for this one. The next one, so they had some
Okay.
insight. So
yeah,
there's some momentum. You just have
that's
to
good.
feed it to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that is sort of the challenge, having more savvy designers who understand lighting controls, kind of helping them navigate what's going on and understand, okay, why did this happen this way? Because otherwise, if the designer doesn't understand a lighting control system, they might say, "Oh, well, it's because it's a bad system," and that unfortunately is probably the most hurtful statement in our industry, because it's not that something wasn't installed correctly, something wasn't programmed correctly. It's that the system itself by default is bad. And that really kind of paints a really bad picture.
I'd like to go back to what we talked about before we started recording. Is
Yeah, go
that
for it.
everyone is a lighting designer. Everyone is a lighting
Mhm.
controls designer.
Mhm.
Everyone can walks into a room and it's like, "Where's that light switch?" And you fumble, like, "Why is that light switch all the way across the room?
Mhm.
Why isn't there one over here?" Aha! See, well, you've thought about it. There should be a light switch right here. Like everyone who can see, who's not visually impaired, can
Mhm.
actually go, "Oh, there needs to be a switch here. Why are we turning off? Why does this switch turn off this and that switch over there turns off something where I like, okay, so there it's how you design the system. Everyone walks into a room, even if it's their own house. I go, if they bought a house, it doesn't mean it was wired the way they wanted it wired. I go, you
Right.
have some innate quality in you that wants it to be designed in a certain way. So everyone is a lighting designer and everyone is a controls designer.
Mhm.
They might not have a say, but they're
Yeah,
just like, oh,
well,
I
and
would really like a switch here.
well, and I think that does beg the question of, what separates like a skilled lighting controls designer from a layman? Like, what are the fundamental properties of a lighting controls designer that makes somebody worth paying for?
If someone you're talking to is saying that they can get these controls for you that you would like at a big box store, then that's not the person you want to talk to. Those big box stores
Right.
do sell the branded controls of these manufacturers, but they're selling you the residential versions of them,
Mhm.
Right.
or not even
The consumer
the
grade stuff.
commercial, the consumer residential, like
Yeah.
even the subgrade of that.
Right.
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 So you're not actually going to get something with quality that
Mhm.
you quality enough where
Well,
you
I mean,
can zone not quality. Like, it's like you can't zone a home with
yeah.
those individually wrapped control modules.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like how consumer grade electronics will say dimmable on a light bulb,
Yeah.
but it actually the question is, what does dimmable mean? And it's the same thing. What does quality lighting control mean when you're walking through a big box store? And in most cases, it doesn't mean these elevated features we're talking about. It's oftentimes just a very simplistic solution that you're just swapping a light switch out for a wall box device. And so as a
And even the
result,
smart ones, like getting the
yeah.
Alexa enabled, the Google, all those enabled
Mhm.
Hmm.
versions take a lot of the thinking out for you. You can
Yes.
pair
Hmm.
with this, and they've got the pre-built canned effects in their apps. And
Yep.
Hmm.
as long as I know
Yeah.
that's
So I
not enough
mean,
for me.
no, it's very much this, we're going to make the choice for you rather than I'm going to make the choice for
Exactly.
myself. And so as a result, you get these very simplistic systems out of these consumer grade components. But I think that's a good point, because when it comes to specifying lighting controls, at least at a more elevated level, we're not talking about just wall box devices anymore. We're talking about networks of devices that need to be
Yep.
coordinated and evaluated.
And it
And
comes down to
so,
cost. Like a network system can be a lot less expensive than, uh, I guess, a distributed version. I'm not sure what the other.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I think
I
it
mean,
is like if you're trying to do a networked lighting control system with wall box devices that you buy at a big box store, you're probably going to not only tear your hair out, but you're also going
right,
to waste a ton of money trying to do something that you could never do with that device.
And you're relying on your internet, your local network in your home
Mm,
to
yes,
be that central
yep.
brain, and in a power outage, or if your system goes down, your router, there's a whole bunch of things that can go wrong. Even if it's not power, it could be network failures and the switch doesn't
right,
work. And people only
yep,
having a device, this is the only way to control something, is not the way to control lights in your
Mhm,
space. It's dangerous. If it's dark, you need to be able to see a physical button. It's nice to pair it with
right.
something additional, but you still
right.
need a physical switch to turn.
Yeah, it's one thing to do that in your house, right? It's another thing to do that in a commercial space where there are, egress laws and things of that nature that you need to worry about, right? Like, you brought up a great point though. You had mentioned earlier about a driver, Adam. Oh, this fixture does 10 to 90, great. And when we specifically look at analog, and then Webster,
Yeah.
you just mentioned you buy the lamp at the store and it's dimmable, right? And it's
Mhm,
they're sort of the same thing. And I think for that's a really good way to describe it. I think for the layperson in general is when you're on an analog signal, not all the drivers are the same, right? Some fixtures are
mhm.
going to have this dimming range and this dimming range and this performance, which is very much the same as you buy the dimmable lamp at the big box store. And lamp A dims okay on your wall box dimmer, but lamp B doesn't. Or lamp A dims faster than lamp B. And even though they say they're the same, they're not the same. And that's exactly the same thing when we get into these large systems. So what you're experiencing at home happens tenfold on these large systems. And I think that's a really good way for people to start to understand how these systems have become so complex with not only dimming but color tuning and everything else, and why moving towards digital and getting away from analog is so important.
Ron, I will say that a lot of the lamps and or fixtures that you could buy in a big box store, on the back of the box, side of the box, whatever, they do list compatible
Yes.
control
Yep.
switches,
Right.
and that's, they're not. It's not a yellow light. Just a suggestion.
Right.
If you want your lamp to
Right.
work like the way you think a lamp should dim, you need to get one of those switches to
Yep.
get
Well,
it to dim
and
right.
there's also an asterisk usually with that, saying that it's
Sure.
dependent upon a lot of other things, because we're talking about phase cut dimming in a lot of cases here, and
Yeah.
phase cut
Hmm.
dimming has a lot of dependencies. Like if you have dirty power, you're going to really have a bad time, regardless of whose dimmer you have. And so the the challenge here is really trying to get away from analog and get towards digital platforms because of that fact that you're no longer relying upon the voltage source for the fixture.
Correct. I
You'll
do have to
you'll
put a
have
thing in there
pained.
that it's a personal thing. The Bluetooth in commercial buildings is a no-no. This is Adam saying it, because let the tenants have control. They don't own the building. They're just a
Oh,
tenant.
you're talking
Or
about app control.
app control.
Oh,
Just give
Yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah.
professor in
got
his
it.
office.
Got it.
Yeah, that's not
Right,
the professor's office. He doesn't own that room.
right.
The school owns that building. That person can move to another room. You don't give these that kind of control to individual users in a
Hmm.
campus setting. They don't own the space. In your home, you own the home. Do it.
Right.
Even the dean
Well,
doesn't.
but
The dean or the You don't give them those kind of
I think
controls.
that that's a
Give
really
them a
good
switch.
good distinction there. We a lot of consumers think Bluetooth and they think the app from a smartphone or a
Yep.
tablet. But for me personally, like if you say Bluetooth, I'm thinking like the network protocol communicating between all the devices, and it's a wireless lighting control system. So as a result, we have already a huge miscommunication point right there
Yep.
where people
Sure.
will just shorthand these terms. But the other thing I agree with you is that, um, you know, don't give somebody complete autonomy over a space that's not 24/7 theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And
You know,
also
I
the commit.
think giving them accessibility, like an auditorium, like you need to adjust the house lighting and the stage lighting and all that. That's fine.
Right. But an office or yeah, even a classroom, that's not, you're not an
Hmm.
auditorium. You're just a temporary user. There's manufacturers out there that like to use Bluetooth to commission their devices, and you
Hmm.
use your phone or your iPad, and you go room by room. When I've got
Mm-hmm.
300 rooms, no, give me a laptop. Let me select. Let me set up one room, copy and paste it to all. When there's 500 offices or something in a building, I'm not going to go to every single office, find it,
Right.
and then set it. And they said that's the only way to do it. I'm like, you've just written yourself off for that reason. I don't have the
Interesting.
time to commission you, my building with your system for that reason.
So yeah, your approach to programming and starting up a lighting control system is that if you need to go space by space, that's an immediate red flag for you on the system. And I totally understand that. I think there are a lot of people who would disagree with that. They would say I love the room by room approach, but again, it depends on the applications and
Have
where
they built that
you're
time into the budget to allow
for
Yeah,
for
sure.
weeks
that's
of commissioning, not a day
Yeah.
or two?
Right. So, I mean, it varies, but I think it's a good distinction to understand on your own, you know, how the system is going to be the startup for the system is going to be done, how it programs, and
mm-hmm.
what the end user experience is going to look like. Those are always good questions to ask about a lighting control system, because if you don't know that and you get to the installation phase, you're kind of behind the eight ball at that point.
What's also missed is code compliancy. Clients don't think about the code compliancy, and I'll say the big ugly word is the daylight harvesting. We're gonna have to turn
Mm-hmm.
off
Hmm.
a lot of your lights, um, and they don't understand. They hear it in the meetings and they go, it's just jargon, and they're gonna go with it, and they get in their building and go, why are the lights off?
Right.
I go, see all those
Right.
windows, all that light coming through? Well, we per code we can't have that light. You have free light coming in.
Right.
We can't have electric light.
Right.
Yeah, they don't understand the code of their locality that requires
Right. Well, and
the
I
daylight
think
harvesting.
that's yeah, that's definitely on us to try to communicate that. But we're almost out of time here,
Okay.
and we really kind of navigated around a weird path
A
here,
lot.
which is I love when we just kind of go and just go in different directions. But I mean, as far as it goes, I mean, really the challenge here with lighting controls is communication
Mm,
and how you communicate. So we started talking about DMX charts and
Sure.
how does the manufacturer communicate how their luminaire is programmed in DMX language, because if you assume how that luminaire is programmed, you might be wrong, and as a result
right.
your programming is going to be 3 times harder because now you have to figure out how it actually is programmed. So having that kind of level of communication is really critical for the designers. But on
Mhm.
the other end, you know, the installers also need to understand how complex something is. And it's not just because it says DMX 512 means that it's complex. You need to understand how to discern one DMX system from another. If it's a huge multimedia facade, fine. That's an expense. That's going to take time and money to do. But if it's just a simple color changing effect in a small portion of the project, odds are you're not even going to need to hire an integrator to do that work. But you do need to be able to recognize the difference between those two
Right.
things. And so again, just having this flat additional charge tacked onto it makes ownership really resistant to that technology, because they go, whoa, you know, this is a really
But
expensive technology we're asking
we are
for.
seeing that tunable is coming back as 0 to 10, as dual 0 to 10. It
So,
doesn't always have to
yeah,
be
so
DMX,
you're
and that's
seeing
helping bring costs
tunable
down.
whites. Interesting. Yeah. And I can see why that transition is happening, because of that fact that people are pushing back against DMX or Dolly because
It's 2
it's
channels. We don't
more
need a
expensive,
full
quote.
DMX system for 2
Right.
channels.
Right.
Right. But at the same time, if you had a DMX system already, on the project, why not leverage it? Or if you already have dolly luminaires, why not get the tunable white luminaires to be dolly as well? So, I think it's also a chicken and an egg situation that we're stuck in, where
Yep.
it's like the owners are afraid of using it, the designers want it, but it's too expensive or too complicated, so they can't get it. And
It's
so,
it's beneficial for the designer to do their own pricing and really hold
mm,
the pricing to their close to them, and they can then QC it against what the contractor's coming back at and kind of hold them
well, and I think
responsible.
Mm.
that's a really good point. And if you don't mind sharing, how do you get pricing for your luminaires and your lighting control systems so that you
I
can
go
kind of
to
hold
my
people
local
accountable?
sales agent of where
Hmm.
I'm located at, depending where the project is. I'll have my local sales agent reach out to that out of territory agent to make sure that whatever price I get, they can hold. If they know they're going to put on some extra
Hmm.
points, as they call it, a
Right,
little
because
extra padding of dollars, that we know that up front. Um,
yeah.
and I know that the standard markup in our industry is the 30%. So whatever price we get from
Hmm.
a sales agent, they put 30% on. That should be the check that the owner writes to them. And I use the long 30, so instead of multiply by 1.3, it's divide by 0.7 because there's the long
Hmm.
markup, and that should account for every hand in that cookie jar. Um,
Right.
and
Well, and y- you're
if a
talking
contractor's
about
like
DNet
double,
versus,
yeah,
yeah.
the
Yeah, so
distributor net
dealer
versus
net,
contractor net.
yeah, I'm sorry, distributor net versus
Mhm.
contractor net. So you usually, if you ask a manufacturer's representative for a pricing, they will give you distributor net, which is whatever the distributors are going to pay for the product. But then on top of that, the contractor is going to mark up
Yep.
approximately 30% to compensate for the work that's going to be associated with that. But so that's how you kind of assess the pricing of a system, is that you get a pricing from a rep, and then you mark it. You make sure that if it's DNet, that you do that markup. If it's
And you
CNet,
don't
then
share
you
the
leave it
DNet with
alone.
anybody. You keep that internal. Only
Sure.
numbers you
Mhm.
share with anybody, client, architect, engineer, is that final marked up number.
Right. Right. And
And
so,
if they come in as
but you.
double, you use the words "sharpen your pen." Go sharpen your pencils. Like, I know it's not that much money.
Mhm.
Please have another look
Right.
at it.
Right.
Sometimes it was an honest mistake. They carried us the zero, and it was like, oh yeah, we missed it, or they were being. It's a
But I think
nefarious
that
reason. They realize it. They can
that's
tell me.
another
Hmm.
point to specialists, lighting controls designers being involved, because if they can be involved during the bidding process and the quotation process, they can help identify, oh, somebody's
Yep.
being unscrupulous here, and you should make sure that this number is actually um, correct, as opposed to just whatever this inflated number is.
Right, and that's how
Yeah,
you
and I
keep.
think it's a great point to the design community in general, right? Because we get a lot of people on the show who are lighting designers who want nothing to do with controls. And even as a lighting designer who doesn't want to deal with the controls, you should at least, because you have some input into how you want the system to function. Once that controls design is done, whether that's by the engineer or another third party or whoever does it, it it probably is a great idea to run through that pricing structure and call your rep who you were calling on during the project anyway for samples and fixtures, and
Mhm.
to go through the controls and get a ballpark for that, so that when you're in these discussions with the owner and with the contractor, you have that number in the back of your head, so it shouldn't be a shock to anybody, it shouldn't be a surprise, and you can turn around to somebody and say, hey, I really think you need to revisit that. I think you might have calculated a couple of zeros incorrectly. And I think that's a great point that I don't know that we've actually really talked about too much on the show in the past. And I think a lot of people could really take a lesson from that.
I know we're running out of time, but I'd like to get to the rep and say, is there a ballpark dollars per square foot? And it could be high,
Yeah.
it could be a
Mm.
wag, a wild a guess on what you think a dollars per square foot in the earliest stages. There's a rough idea, a model of what this building could be. And you can go to the client and say, how in depth do you see controlling the building to be? And you can have the $3 a square foot, the $5 a square foot, the $7 a square foot.
Mm.
And you can say, okay, this is how just have the big brush strokes of dollars per square foot for the whole building and figure
Mhm.
where they kind of want to see where they want to spend where they want to put their money on the controls, and
Right.
um, that helps
Well, and
push the design
again, I
down.
think that that's along that lines of communication. So it's like
Yep.
clarifying
Communication.
where you want most money to be concentrated and how the system's going to kind of interact with that pricing structure.
I agree.
Awesome. Adam, yeah, thank you so much. This has been great. I love that we just like dove right into DMX when we started, and then we started talking about drivers and dimmers and big box stores, and then ended up talking about pricing. And it's great. It was a great conversation. I think our listeners will get a lot out of it. Hopefully, some of the designers listening take a page out of your book and start thinking about, you know what, after, if we don't do the controls design, after it's done, we should really go back to our reps, get an idea of what that number is, and have that so that these conversations are a little easier to have at, when the bids come in. So Adam, great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I
Thank you for
will
having me.
just close us out and remind everyone that today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and also Light Fair, May 3rd through 5th. We will see you guys there.
And it's also financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes, a lot of other stuff, including information about the NAILD LSC, which we mentioned in this episode, but definitely worth checking it out if you want to learn more about lighting controls and get involved. But also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We could not do this without your support. Maxlite, maxlite.com/CMAX. They have a lot of great programming and startup resources, varying from type to type. If you are opinionated like Adam is on how you do your startup, they have an option for you. So definitely check them out. Really good resources. They have industry leading technology as well as patented technology with the USB-C port connectivity, which I think it's just super sharp. It's a really cool idea, and I hope we're going to see more of that in the future. But check them out, maxlite.com/CMAX. But until then, thank you so much for joining us. And Adam, thank you. This was an awesome conversation.